please subscribe and don't forget to press the bell icon to get notified whenever we upload a new video.
First up, let's take a look at the Asian markets, and they are pretty happy in trade today. All of them fairly on the greener side. In fact, they're trading at the high point of today's session. The Japanese index trading with a gain of almost 260 points, also aided by a bit of a weakening on the dollar yen. If you take a look at today's movement of the dollar yen, you will see that it's currently at the lowest point in today's trading session. A lot of the sectors, in fact, most of the sectors doing fairly well. Utilities and retail in particular doing well in Japan. That comes on the back of a strong handover coming in from Wall Street, which rallied on the back of robust earnings coming from all three sectors. One was Netflix, which was up 9%, United Health, as well as Goldman Sachs. If you take a look at the Korean markets too, they're led higher by manufacturing, technology stocks, both of them trading. In fact, the Korean markets also trading with a gain of 1.2%. In the economic data release for Japan, March exports, they were up 2.1%. Trade surplus came in at closer to that 800 billion yen. If you take a look at the Straits as well as the Taiwanese indices, both of them up closer to about 1%. The SGX Nifty, that one should come up for you. That one's indicating a gain of 50 points at the outset. 10,580 to 10,600 is known to be a bit of a speed breaker for our markets. Let's see whether this up move will be used to build on to more gains or perhaps hit a wall.
Okay, let's see whether we are able to cross that speed breaker today or not. But the gain in Asian market actually tracked of what happened in the US markets, because remember, the US stocks rallied with major indices closing at the highest levels in about a month, boosted by strong corporate earnings. The Dow rose over 200 points at close. The S&P 500 also gained over 1% in trade, while the Nasdaq advanced 1.7% as shares of Netflix jumped over 9% on better than expected earnings. CNBC's Eric gets the wrap of all the action on Wall Street.
For CNBC TV18, I'm Eric Chemi. U.S. markets finishing the day higher. The Dow adding 213 points, the S&P up 28, and the Nasdaq gaining 124. U.S. home building was up more than expected last month. Multi-family housing unit construction was strong, but weakness in the single-family home segment, that points to a slowing housing market. It's tax day today, but last-minute filers, you got to beware the IRS online payment site where you can wire money from a bank account to pay your tax bill free of charge. That crashed. It's still unavailable. Filers can still use the IRS site to pay with a debit or credit card, but that option is going to cost you some money. Paper checks, that's another option for filers fighting the last-minute deadline. And Starbucks will be closing all 8,000 company-owned stores in the United States for the afternoon on May 29th. To conduct racial bias education for its 175,000 employees. The training will address implicit bias, promote inclusion, and help prevent discrimination. The announcement comes following an uproar when two black men were arrested while waiting at a Philadelphia Starbucks location last Thursday. That's the action from the U.S. market. Back to you in Mumbai.
Okay, getting more action from what happened in the United States. President Donald Trump and Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe meet in Florida to discuss trade issues, as well as Trump's potential meeting with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. Speaking on North Korea, Trump said he hopes to hold a summit meeting with Kim Jong-un and that 5 locations are being considered. But it remains possible that such a meeting may not happen before June.
Japan and ourselves are locked, and we are very unified on the subject of North Korea. We will probably be, depending on the various meetings and conversations, we'll be having meetings with Kim Jong-un very soon. That'll be taking place probably in early June or a little before that, assuming things go well.
President Trump saying there are 5 different locations under consideration for the location for that summit. The date and time still have not been exactly pinned down, and there's some speculation that the North Korean leader could be concerned that if he leaves the country, he might not be able to maintain his grip on the society there. So we'll wait and see where that event actually happens, if it does. The Japanese Prime Minister also here to talk with the President of the United States about trade. U.S. officials signaling that the TPP renegotiations, which they signaled last week, are perhaps less fully baked than last week's headlines might have suggested. Also saying that they're considering some exemptions under the so-called 232 tariffs for the Japanese side, but all of that still to be negotiated here in Palm Beach, Florida.
All right, then let's shift across to across the Atlantic in the European markets. They ended on a positive note. In fact, a strong set of gains that we saw on across the European indices. Strong earnings from corporates, the likes of Genmap. They boosted stocks. The German index, that one outperformed with a gain of close to about 1.6%, and that was because Bayer, that stock moved about 3%. The FTSE, that one ended 27 points in the green, but still underperforming the other indices. That's primarily because the sterling, the UK pound, that one is at the strongest level since Brexit, close to about 1.43, 1.44 versus the dollar. The CAC, the French index, also about 0.75%. Big gains seen on the peripheral indices, the likes of the Italian index as well as the ATEX should come up for you. Both of them sitting anywhere between the gain of 1.5 to 2%. The IBEX as well as the Irish indices were slight underperformers. But if you take a look at the Russian markets, that one really moved higher. 3.5% gains on the Russian index. Rusal, the stock that was losing, that one gained about 6.8% in yesterday's session. The Brazilian index too, sitting with a gain of 1.5%. So looking good across the globe.
Okay, let's just focus to what is happening in the space of currency then. The dollar holds on to modest gains after climbing off a 3-week low on upbeat US data. Well, back home on the Wall Street, the markets ended in the green for the 9th consecutive day for the first time since January 2015. The Nifty ended with a 20-point gain, just 2 points shy of the 10,550 mark, while the Sensex gained 90 points. The broader markets underperformed a tad bit. Both mid-caps and banks closed almost flat with a tad bit of positive bias. But that was about yesterday. How's the trade setup looking for the day? Sonia joins us with more details. Sonia, good morning. It looks like to begin with, SGX Nifty suggesting a gap-up opening.
Yes, it is. And, you know, as you rightly suggested, 9 straight day of gains for the market. The texture of this market definitely has turned from a sell-on rally to a buy-on dips. In fact, this is the longest winning streak that we've seen since September of 2014. And there's money coming in from the domestic institutional fraternity. So yesterday as well, we saw DIIs buy about 724 crores in the cash market. Put together, it's almost 4,000 crores of buying that we've seen in this month already. And FI selling, though, continues. We've seen FIs sell about 950 odd crores in the cash market yesterday. But the good part about yesterday and the last few days is that a lot of heavyweights have supported the market. So even in trade yesterday, we've seen HDFC, ITC, ICICI Bank support the market. This morning, global cues are strong. The Dow once again has closed with gains of more than 200 points. In fact, it's positive earnings across the US market that has aided this move. We saw Netflix report really good subscriber addition. Goldman Sachs as well saw a good set of numbers come in, although the stock closed in the red. So all of this put together has led to positive cues from across the globe. Even the F&O data is encouraging. So in all likelihood, we could continue to see that up move.
All right, Sonia. So in that up move, what are the stocks to watch out for in trade today?
Well, in earnings today, we do have names like ACC, HDFC, Standard Life, Mastech, Mindtree, Cera Sanitaryware that will be reporting their numbers. So there's a fairly hectic, day in terms of earnings. Fortis Health, well, another bidder is in the fray now. So the fourth bidder comes through. The Chinese company Fosun has also, thrown their hat into the ring. So let's see how this one goes. Jagran Prakashan, there's a board meet on the 27th of April to discuss the buyback of shares. And Tata Spun Giant came out with a very good set of numbers. So the revenues over there went up by 46%, coming in at a little shy of 250 crores. And the EBITDA jumped up almost 140%. So you can expect that stock to be in the green today. Back to you.
Okay, Sonia, thank you so much for that. But it is time now for a quick break.
Government has swung into action after some ATMs run dry in at least 5 states. So what has caused this sudden shortage? Lata Venkatesh joins us with an explainer. Lata, what exactly are you picking from your sources? On the one hand, the government is saying there is no shortage, but on the other, you are also quadrupling printing. That's the word coming in from the government. What do you make of this?
Okay, well, there's no denying that there has been excessive withdrawal, which has been a secular rise. It's been rising, say, July was more than June, August more than July, and it's so on and so forth. And this February, March, April, it's been like 50,000 crore a month. So clearly there is a demand issue, but here's a supply issue as well. The Reserve Bank in February last year, 2017, placed an order for 33 billion notes to be printed in FY18, that is 2017-18. And then in June, it brought it down. I mean, it gives this order to the 4 printing presses, 2 of them which it owns and 2 of them government owns. It brought down that order to 20 billion notes, believing that once the economy is reflated with new notes, the demand for cash will fall. But that didn't happen. When it noticed an increase in the cash withdrawal pace, it restored the order to 33 billion to the presses. But what did the presses do by then? They found that when Reserve Bank reduced the order from 33 to 20, they allowed the ink contract to lapse. They allowed the security threads contracts to lapse, thinking that they will not need so much ink and so much security thread. Now, when the order was again boosted in December 2017, they found that they had run out of ink. And that is why they are not able to meet the increased demand. You know, the government processes require that you have to give tenders, and there is a due process before you replenish whether it is ink or paper or security threads. And therefore, it just is taking time. So while there is a demand issue, no one denies that there has been higher withdrawal ahead of political election season, or simply because people want to evade taxes and restrict themselves to the black economy. There are demand reasons, but there is a supply reason as well.
Okay, there are demand as well as supply reasons causing that cash crunch, but we also reached out to the CEO of Niti Aayog, Amitabh Kant, and Sanjeev Sanyal, the principal economic advisor. Kant attributed the shortage of cash to the rise in agriculture activity, while Sanjeev Sanyal admitted that spurt in cash demand is unusual, but he stopped short of blaming it on seasonality.
My personal view is that it's a demand related to the agricultural sector, and this is a demand relating to the agriculture production season. And therefore, if there's a demand required for agriculture production productivity, that liquidity needs to be provided to give a huge impetus to agricultural production. And if it's a requirement by from rural areas coming in, we need to ensure that this demand is fully met in terms of what the DA Secretary has already said in terms of making 500 notes available in all rural areas as well.
Certainly in very recent days that there has been a big spike, and it is certainly very unusual. The usual explanations, seasonality, festival season and so on, would not normally explain this spike. This is not a case that we do not have the cash. In fact, we have more than adequate cash in reserve, and more will be printed if necessary. So just bear with us while we supply this cash to the areas necessary, and in the next few days, this problem should ease off.
All right, let's move on then to the other big headline coming in from the banking space. Parliament's Standing Committee on Finance has called the RBI Governor Urjit Patel to answer queries on banking scams that have been unearthed in the last few months. Reports suggest that the RBI Governor will appear before the panel on the 17th of May.
Well, Fortis will be in focus today as the company receives another bid as China's Fosun enters the race, submits a non-binding bid. Nisha joins in with more details on that. Nisha, this comes just a day ahead of the board meet to decide on the bid. It looks like there are a lot of suitors lined up for Fortis.
Oh yes, the excitement just doesn't ebb down when it comes to Fortis Healthcare's transaction, Anisha. So yes, last evening, Fosun, which is a Chinese company, has also made the plunge into the Fortis transaction, has offered a non-binding bid for Fortis Healthcare. And this is very similar in nature to Munjal and Burman's offer as well, because it is clearly for taking care of the immediate requirement of liquidity for Fortis Healthcare. So they've offered to pay about 100-odd crore rupees, infuse it in the company initially, then do a due diligence, and if all goes well, then infuse up to $350 million and buy less than 25% stake. They do not have any intention of a takeover from the letter. They want to immediately infuse capital for the liquidity concerns and stay as a large investor. Now, remember, Fosun's offer values Fortis share at 156 rupees per share. That is also in line with what Munjal and Burman has really offered. So, it's getting more and more interesting. This is the fourth player after TPG-backed Manipal, which has a more concrete binding offer, IHH, which made a non-binding offer, and Munjal and Burman, who had also come into the fray in the interim as a liquidity provider. So yes, Fosun, the Chinese player, has gained more confidence after buying out Gland Pharma from KKR last year and now is making another plunge.
All right, Nisha, thanks a lot for that. Quite an action-packed battle that for Fortis. But talking about action coming in from the insolvency space now, Electro Steel Steels, that one's become the first of the 12 large stressed assets or stressed accounts to be resolved under the IBC. The National Company Law Tribunal, NCLT as we know it, today approved the resolution plan submitted by Vedanta Group for the company. Sources tell CNBC TV18 that Vedanta actually offered a little over 5,000 crores for Electro Steel Steels, and with this offer, banks will now take a haircut of over 55% on the debt. Remember, Vedanta had outbid Tata Steel, Renaissance Steel and Edelweiss ARC to acquire Electro Steel Steels.
Okay, moving on then, in its newly released World Economic Outlook, the International Monetary Fund has kept its growth outlook for the global economy unchanged at 3.9% for both 2018 as well as 2019. It has also left India's growth forecast unchanged at 7.4% for FY19 and 7.8% for FY20. Ritu Singh is here with more details.
In its World Economic Outlook report for April 2018, the IMF has maintained the global growth forecast at 3.9% for 2018 and at 3.9% again for 2019, the same as what it had forecast in the month of January earlier this year. The bulk of this growth, it says, will come from the improved growth prospects in the United States, where the growth forecast has been revised by 20 basis points to 2.9% in 2018 and about 2.7% for 2019. The advanced economies as a whole are seen growing at 2.5% in 2018 versus the earlier forecast of 2.3%. In the emerging markets, growth is maintained at 4.9% for 2018. Within this, now India's growth forecast has also been held constant at 7.4% for FY19 versus 6.7% in the previous year, and at 7.8% for FY20 versus 6.7% again in FY18. Now, the reason for this rebound in growth in India is a strong private consumption, which is aiding this growth. IMF also said that the transitory effects of demonetization and GST are also behind, which is also helping the Indian economy grow forward. Some of the key risks to global growth here highlighted by IMF are, the growing trade tensions between US and China, protectionist policies, and also the US tax reforms, which it says starting 2020 will start to slow down growth.
All right, Ritu, thanks a lot for that. But the IMF, they say that the tax reforms in the United States will hurt global growth momentum starting 2020. Speaking with CNBC's Sarah Eason about growing trade tensions, the International Monetary Fund's chief economist Maurice Obstfeld said that it is hard for any country to win a trade war, and even if it does, it's still a lose-lose situation.
This is pretty much as good as it gets for now. Our longer-term numbers are a bit lower than this. But, we're also emphasizing that there are things governments can do now to prolong this upswing and to make it more resilient.
And one of those things you warn against is tariffs and trade conflicts. And you say it's the most obvious risk to growth. So if we do see tariffs or further escalation in this tit-for-tat between the U.S. and China, what type of hit to growth are we talking about for the global economy?
Well, it really depends on how far things escalate. From the types of measures that have been threatened so far, the direct hit to growth wouldn't be that great, although certain individuals and certain industries could suffer. The big risk would be if these sorts of actions spook asset markets, spook stock markets and other markets, and that could have a more serious effect on confidence and growth.
Who gets hurt more, the U.S. or China, if this were to develop into a trade war?
You know, again, I think trade wars are hard to win. You know, even if you win, you lose. And so I think both countries would do badly. Both depend on a robust, resilient world economy, and that's what's at risk here.
Okay, let's talk about the latest status coming in from the goods and service tax space. A group of ministers headed by Bihar Finance Minister Sushil Modi met different stakeholders yesterday to devise a simple single-stage return filing process under the new tax regime. Now, speaking to the media later, Sushil Modi confirmed that 2 return filing forms, which is the GSTR R1 and GSTR 3B, will continue beyond June 2018.
मित्रों, उसी के साथ साथ तो जहाँ तक सिंप्लीफिकेशन ऑफ रिटर्न्स हैं उस पर आज भी काफ़ी दिन भर चर्चा हुई है और जो स्टेक होल्डर्स हैं उनको ये कहा गया है कि वो 7 डेज़ के अंदर अपना जो ओपिनियन है, अपनी व्यूज़ हैं, उसे जीएसटी काउंसिल को अवगत कराएंगे। जो 3B है, विच इज़ अ काइंड ऑफ समरी रिटर्न, जो पिछले 8 महीने से लोग फाइल कर रहे हैं, ये कंटिन्यू करेगा 3B.
All right, time for a short break. Come back. We focus on the earnings corner. ACC and Mindtree report their quarterly earnings. We'll get you what the street is expecting on the other side. Stay with Power Breakfast.